Hi, I'm Dan Everett, owner of Insightful Research. Today I'm talking about why becoming data-driven is so hard and some brain-based behavior strategies to help you become more data-driven. Let's start with defining data-driven. My definition is decisions based on evaluation of facts against clearly defined criteria and weightings. This could be as simple as A/B testing to see which email subject line gets more open rates. Or it could be a decision matrix as part of an RFP for scoring vendor proposals. Regardless of the methodology, the goal is to remove subjectivity and bias from decisions. Organizationally, what levers can we use to become data-driven? Well, we have technology, cloud, AI and analytics, and data management enable us to find, curate, and use data in decision-making. We have methodologies, A/B testing, decision matrices, net present value calculations. These things help us compare options and objectively decide on the best one. We have governance, policies and procedures, risk controls and processes, and audit and review boards that help guide us in appropriate decision making and help us monitor and enforce compliance. And we have people. Right? We define roles and responsibilities. We establish authority and accountability. We provide training and enablement that empower us to take action and work together to become data-driven. Overall, I would say we do a good job with these levers. Is there room for improvement? Of course, there always is. But I imagine most of you understand how to make these a part of your operating model. And still, less than a quarter of data and analytics leaders say their organization is data-driven. So what's stopping us from becoming data-driven? The piece that's missing, what we don't understand, is how to change people's behavior. This is the fundamental challenge to becoming data-driven, and it's our biggest opportunity to make an outsized impact on creating a data-driven organization. Let's look at why changing behavior around decision-making is so hard and what we can do to become more data-driven. Changing behavior is difficult because of something brain researchers call cognitive bias. We like to believe our decisions are based on the evaluation of facts, but research into how the brain works shows that many decisions are based on mental shortcuts known as cognitive bias. Some examples include anchoring bias, where we overemphasize the first piece of information that we receive. Confirmation bias, where we filter the data that we use in analysis to validate our point of view. And then there's framing bias, where we focus on who's presenting information instead of the information itself. Cognitive bias works like a machine learning algorithm. It applies generalization, approximation, and assumption to make decisions as quickly as possible. Orange, stripes, tiger, flee. Cognitive bias is a function of the brain's information processing systems. So there's the limbic system in the middle of the brain. It controls survival processing and is designed to keep us safe in the world. Survival processing uses cognitive bias so it can reduce risk by acting fast. So if you're driving in a car and someone cuts in front of you, you slam on the brakes. You don't evaluate how close you are or how fast you're going. It's a non-conscious reaction. The prefrontal cortex is at the front of the brain. It controls the logical processing, and it's designed to help us understand the world. The brain uses about 20% of the body's energy, and logical processing is highly resource intensive. Think about one of those days when you get home from work and just feel exhausted, even though you didn't do any physical activity. That's because the brain uses so much energy. And the prefrontal cortex also has limited capacity. It can only hold 5 to 7 things in working memory at once. So logical processing uses cognitive bias so it can conserve energy to expand capacity. want to reduce the impact of cognitive bias, you must first accept that if you have a brain, you have cognitive bias. It's also helpful to have a framework to help us identify and discuss cognitive bias. The RACE framework is based on the brain's processing priorities we just discussed. Reduce risk by acting fast in survival processing, and conserve energy to expand capacity in logical processing. Let's look closer at each of these and a method I call if emotion, then question, and act to mitigate that you can use to reduce cognitive bias. Survival processing prioritizes safety over reward to reduce risk. So if emotion, if I feel anxious about a decision, then question, am I being overly risk averse? And act to mitigate. Fully and objectively evaluate other options. Emotion and feeling don't immediately come to mind when thinking about becoming data-driven, but they're a valuable piece of information for identifying cognitive bias. The ambiguity effect is a type of cognitive bias where we view known options as less risky. So if emotion, if I feel anxious about a decision and I'm favoring a known option, then question, how can the risks in other options be mitigated? And act to mitigate by determining the information needed to manage the risk. There used to be a saying in tech world that nobody gets fired for buying IBM. While that perspective has changed, it demonstrates how the brain prioritizes safety over reward. This is why branding influences purchasing decisions. Survival processing prioritizes speed over accuracy to act fast. So confirmation bias happens when we overemphasize information that validates our point of view. So if emotion, if I feel hurried to decide, and I'm deciding based on my experience, then question, how am I filtering data to confirm existing beliefs or experiences? And act to mitigate by expanding your analysis to include facts with opposite points of view. In 1986, NASA engineers warned about a potential O-ring failure in cold weather. In the rush to meet their launch deadlines, NASA management downplayed those concerns, arguing that the O-rings had performed well in previous launches under similar conditions. The O-rings did indeed fail, causing the Challenger space shuttle to explode. This tragedy highlights the dangers of prioritizing speed over accuracy. Logical processing prioritizes efficiency over accuracy to conserve resources. The halo effect is when we're influenced by who delivers information and how it's presented. So if emotion, if I feel tired and I'm basing my decision on what someone is telling me, then question, how would my decision change if a different person was giving me the information? And act to mitigate by focusing on the criteria and the weightings that success will be measured against. The movie Air about the partnership between Nike and basketball legend Michael Jordan is a great example of the halo effect. Nike went from very little market share in basketball shoes to the undisputed leader with the Air Jordan brand. Yes, the shoes were good, but it was the association with Michael Jordan that fueled market domination. Influencer marketing works because the brain prioritizes efficiency over accuracy. If Michael has his name on the shoe, it must be good. Logical processing prioritizes completion over importance to expand capacity. Think about a time when you felt overwhelmed. There was just so many things to do on my list. And we look for the easy things to complete so we can feel better when we check it off the list, even though that task may not have been the best use of our time or energy. The sunken cost fallacy is when we seek to complete tasks regardless of the benefit. So if emotion, if I feel I'm a failure if I don't make something work, then question, how much value will more investment produce? And act to mitigate. Focus on the future costs and benefits, not on the costs already incurred. I worked for an airline at one point in my career. They decided to build a new reservation system. After spending several $1,000,000, it was clear the system wasn't going to work as needed. But they continued with the project and ended up spending tens of millions of dollars before they finally pulled the plug. I imagine you have your own examples where prioritizing completion over importance resulted in poor decisions. So the RACE framework is a structure to help you become aware of and discuss cognitive bias. It's a function of how the brain processes information. The if emotion, then question, and act to mitigate method is a way to help you reduce cognitive bias. Adding brain-based behavior strategies like the RACE framework and the if-then-act method to the organizational structures you already have in place can help you change behavior and make an outsized impact on creating a data-driven organization. I'll leave you with this. If you remember nothing else from my presentation, remember, if you have a brain, you have cognitive bias. That mantra can help you become aware enough to pause and use the RACE framework and the if emotion, then question, and act to mitigate method. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to learn more about brain-based behavior and how to use it in your organization, reach out to me on LinkedIn.